Hi, everybody, and welcome to Lovefraud Live. So, a Lovefraud reader once wrote to me with an astute observation. She'd seen a post on Facebook that said, "Words may lie, but actions always tell the truth." This reader had an aha moment. She thought, when you're dealing with a sociopath, even actions can lie. I'm Donna Andersen, author of Lovefraud.com, and tonight I'm going to explain how, with sociopaths, both words and actions can be lies. This is a live streaming show, and I'll answer your questions at the end of this short presentation. So send them to me as we go along. Okay. Anyone who has tangled with a sociopath knows that they lie. They tell big lies, they tell small lies, they tell outrageous lies, they tell stupid lies. Sociopaths lie to you while looking deep into your eyes, holding your hand, and promising that they will never lie to you. Unfortunately, human beings are lousy lie detectors, especially in the beginning of a romantic involvement, as this person is showering you with attention and affection. When the sweet words include, "I'll love you forever," and "You're the one I've been waiting for all my life," well, who doesn't want to believe that? The standard advice regarding sociopaths is to ignore their words and pay attention to their actions. But as this Lovefraud reader pointed out, sometimes you can't pay attention to their actions either. Sociopaths lie with their actions as well as with their words. In fact, they sometimes specifically plan and take actions with the objective of convincing you of whatever their storyline is, so that you believe and trust them. Later, after you've bought their story, they spring their trap. So, what are examples of sociopathic actions that are really lies? Here are a few that I experienced within the first few weeks of meeting my sociopathic ex-husband, James Montgomery. First of all, we met online, and while we were communicating by email, before we met in person, he sent me copies of military documents about his heroism and the medals he earned while fighting in Vietnam. His purpose was to portray himself as a war hero. In fact, he told me that he was still affiliated with U.S. Special Forces. I later found out that all of this documentation was forged. It appeared that he usurped the identity of another man who was a true war hero. Here's the second thing. Shortly after we met in person, he took me out for a nice dinner. Well, this of course is what a man does in order to show romantic interest in a woman. I thought we were dating, but in reality, Montgomery was beginning his love bombing campaign. Here's the third thing. A few days after the dinner, Montgomery took me with him to look at a TV station that he said he was thinking about buying. Sounded pretty impressive. Montgomery had told me that he was a Hollywood scriptwriter and producer, which I later discovered was also highly exaggerated. But by taking me with him, he made it appear that he was truly in the entertainment business. The TV station, by the way, wasn't much. It looked more like a closet full of security cameras. Here's number 4. After the trip to this pseudo TV station, Montgomery proposed to me. He very properly asked, "Will you do me the great honor of becoming my wife?" Well, by this point, of course, I had been swept off my feet. I said yes. I naively thought that someone who proposed marriage to me did it because he loved me and wanted to spend the rest of his life with me. At the time, I did not know that I was being targeted for my assets and my credit line. Here's the fifth example. Not long after that, Montgomery told me that he had to go on a special forces mission in another country. It's going to be very dangerous. In fact, while he was apologizing to me for having to leave and go on this dangerous mission, a call came in on his cell phone. He answered it. "This is James." Then I hear, "Yes, General." "Yes, sir." "I understand." "Sir, we really shouldn't be discussing this now. I'm on a handheld radio phone." Here's the kicker. Montgomery wasn't going on a secret mission. In fact, he was never in the military. The whole scene was faked. He had an accomplice call while he was with me so he could pretend to be talking to a general. And I'll bet Montgomery and his buddy laughed their butts off after that one. Finally, after the so-called secret mission, I visited Montgomery for the first time in his home. It was a very nice townhouse, furnished in a traditional style, with new furniture, custom drapes, and large paintings hanging on the walls. My fiancé stood in the middle of the living room, gestured to all the surroundings, very expansive, and said, "Soon all of this will be yours." Well, the truth was that he owned none of it. Everything belonged to his previous wife, who had died, and Montgomery wasn't even in her will. By the way, if you want to know more about my wild story, and it is truly wild, it's all in my first book, Lovefraud, which just came out as an audiobook, and there's a description in the link below. So, to summarize, in the first few weeks of knowing James Montgomery, he took the following actions. 1. He shared documents about his so-called heroism in Vietnam. 2. He took me out for a nice dinner. 3. He included me in his so-called business plans with a TV station. 4. He proposed marriage. 5. He pretended to be going on a secret military mission. And 6. He promised that the townhouse and everything in it would be mine. All of these actions were lies. This is what sociopaths do. They lie through their words and their deeds. Sociopaths may take you out to a romantic dinner, they may play with your kids, they may cut your grass or paint your house, buy flowers for your mother, buy chocolates for your little brother. Now, usually, when somebody engages in behaviors like these, it's because they want to show that they care about you. But when sociopaths take what seem to be caring, thoughtful actions, they always have an agenda. They are behaving in a socially appropriate way because they are reeling you in for future exploitation. Or they're creating an image that will benefit them in other exploitation efforts. Now, you probably know this. Because you've had similar experiences, you've learned the hard way that a sociopath's actions, as well as their words, are most likely false. So, as you move forward in life after this experience, what do you do with this knowledge? What does all this mean for your personal recovery? How do you build new relationships when you feel like you can't trust people's words and you can't trust people's actions? The answer is you learn to trust yourself. And how do you do that? By focusing on your own healing. If you're like most people who became involved with sociopaths, you knew in your gut from early in the involvement that something was wrong. The story didn't add up, you had a bad feeling, you sensed that something was terribly amiss. But you didn't listen to yourself. The biggest reason why you didn't trust your instincts was probably because you didn't know that sociopaths exist. You didn't know that people live among us who look just like us, engage in what appears to be trustworthy behavior, but have no heart, no conscience, and no remorse. Now you know. You have the empirical knowledge to make sense of these internal warnings, if you ever feel them again. But if you've become anxious and mistrustful of everyone, how do you differentiate between legitimate internal warnings and anxious or imagined internal warnings? That's where the healing comes in. With healing, you can become comfortable with the concept that while most people are basically good, a certain segment of the population is not. And with healing, you learn to value yourself. You come to understand that you're the one who knows what is best for you. You can feel comfortable walking away from anyone or anything that doesn't feel right, without waiting for objective proof that the situation is bad. Now, even a good, solid recovery probably will not prevent sociopaths from coming into your life. There are simply too many of them out there, and they're everywhere, and they're very, very good at what they do. So they may fool you for a little while. But with recovery, they won't fool you for long. And when your instincts start emitting those warning signals, you'll know what they mean. Here's how I define success in spotting sociopaths. It's not keeping them out of your life entirely. It's getting them out of your life before they do serious damage. When you learn to trust yourself, you can trust your internal warnings and then successfully protect yourself. Okay, let me see what kind of questions we may have today. Wendy says, I got flowers all the time, but it never moved past that. I was head over heels with that romantic gesture. I really feel like I don't trust people now. Well, Wendy, I would say that focus on your healing. What that means is to allow yourself to feel the grief and anger and frustration and betrayal of that of your experience, which is all totally real and totally legitimate. But you have to allow yourself to feel it. Sometimes, we try to just sweep it under the carpet or, push it out of our minds. And so it stays inside us and fester. So by allowing yourself to heal it and get it out of your system, that's when you can start to find that equilibrium that will enable you to know when trust is warranted and when it isn't. Because, as I said in a little presentation, now you know. Now you know that these people are out there. You know what they're capable of. And so with this knowledge and healing, you can fine-tune your senses and your instincts so that you can protect yourself. Story time with Vinny. Everything is too good to be true. First big red flag. Yep. I mean, there is a reason for that saying. If it's too good to be true, it probably is. And now we know that too. A hard lesson, definitely a hard lesson, but something that's perfect probably has hidden flaws, and they might be very serious flaws. Okay, so CC is me says, looking back, I see red flags, like distance from family, couldn't hold a job, but at the time, I didn't. Very naive. We were all naive, and in all honesty, I really don't think that we should be hard on ourselves for not realizing that these people are out there. And the reason for that is because nobody tells us. Our culture does not prepare us for the fact that there are people who are seriously damaged, irreparably damaged, living among us. I mean, the messages we hear all the time are, everybody has good inside. We all just want to be loved. We're all God's children. We're all created equal. They don't tell us that there are exceptions. They don't tell us that some people are rotten to the core and need to be avoided. And they certainly don't tell us that these people can pretend to be just like the rest of us. I mean, yeah, we probably know to, not go into bad neighborhoods, or you see people hanging out on a corner dealing drugs. That's not a good place to be. That's obvious. Nobody tells us that evil people can be doctors, lawyers, clergy, psychologists, teachers, housewives. They could be anywhere. And because we don't know anything about this, we're simply unprepared. Now we know, and now we can prepare ourselves. Donna, you are so knowledgeable. When are you going to go on tour? Well, maybe with my next book. I think I've mentioned before that I'm working on the Senior Sociopath book. The material I have is unbelievable, and so hopefully when that comes out, I'll go on tour. But it'll be a while yet. I'm about halfway through it, so hopefully maybe this year. So, okay. Okay, so Sammy. Hi, Sammy. The hardest part, imagining allowing yourself to feel it. It's scary but necessary. Yeah, it's hard, because the pain goes very deep. It's scary, it's. I mean, sometimes we're afraid that if we allow ourselves to start crying, that will never stop. And actually that's kind of a false fear, because we do stop. And the way you stop is by allowing yourself to get it out of your system. Because, I mean, that's how you process it. You allow yourself to feel the emotions, and then they dissipate. And then you don't have that internal pressure, that constant feeling on the edge of collapse. So it's risky, or it seems risky. It feels risky, but it does work. Definitely is not pretty. I recommend that if you're going to allow yourself to really feel the emotion, that you do it privately, because other people, have a hard time being around it. Unless you have a really good therapist, they may be able to help you. But sometimes you just gotta let it rip, and it ain't pretty, but in the end, it does feel a lot better. Okay, so Nobi Brooklyn says, is a person sociopathic if they like putting their hands around your neck and saying the reason is to get your blood pumping? Or is it to dominate and intimidate? I would say that is a very dangerous behavior. That one symptom doesn't necessarily mean that somebody is a sociopath. However, it's a precursor to violence. In fact, there's some research among domestic violence, in the domestic violence field, that a lot of women who end up being victims of domestic violence, the first warning sign is that the person tries to choke them. I would say that that's a reason to certainly be very cautious. It's not necessarily a warning sign that the person is a sociopath, although it could be by itself. I mean, that's the thing about this disorder, is that there are a lot of traits and you kind of need to see the whole pattern. But if you've looked at our material, if you've gotten the checklist on love fraud, of warning signs that somebody is a sociopath, and the person does all those things on the checklist, plus is putting his hands, I assume it's a guy, putting his hands around your neck, you need to be cautious. I mean, that could be a very big warning sign. Okay, DB Max says, with your help, the veil has been lifted. I see him and don't hope for change. Thank you for releasing me, as he doesn't want to. Married with 2 kids and no emotional connection on my end since can't go NC. Okay, well, yeah, if you can't totally manage no contact, emotional no contact is the next best thing. I mean, essentially to understand what he is, which according to your note here, you do, and to realize that it's not going to get any better. And I imagine if you're still in that involvement, it's to protect your kids. But when you get to the point where you don't have an emotional connection anymore, where you've accepted that this person is what he is, that helps a lot. I mean, that's a big step towards recovery, and will probably also help you to endure until you do have the opportunity to get away from him. Oh, so CC says, at what age do you consider a senior sociopath? Well, in my case, for the research that I did, it was anyone over the age of 50. One of the interesting things is that the mental health field has this common wisdom, I guess you could say, that sociopaths burn out as they get older. I mean, that's actually stated in quite a few psychiatry textbooks, and lots of people have said this. And they say that the behavior tends to diminish starting in the age 40. And I thought that was kind of weird, because my ex-husband was 55 when I met him, although of course he lied about his age as well. And he was certainly engaging in sociopathic behavior. But essentially what has happened is that there are statistics related to crime, and crime convictions and being sentenced definitely does drop off in 30s and 40s for most people. So what these professionals have done is they've conflated crime statistics with personality disorder statistics, and assume that since crime and convictions drops off, that the disorder drops off, which is totally not true. And believe me, I've got lots and lots of documentation to prove that. So that's why I'm working on the book. Heather, thank you for your kind words. I appreciate it. Suzanne, I'm so glad that my books are helping you. Knowing the truth helps a lot. Part of the reason why we're so confused is that we don't understand what's going on. And this person may be telling you that they love you and making you feel guilty and all this other stuff. And, once you learn that it's all an act and that they have an agenda, that's a good starting point. I mean, understanding what happened is the first step, but then after that, it's processing the emotions and the shame and the disappointment and the guilt. And of course, we shouldn't be feeling shame and guilt because we did nothing wrong. Essentially, we were human and they took advantage of our humanity. But nonetheless, typically when we start figuring out what's going on, the person we're most upset with is ourselves. I hope to convince you that you shouldn't be that way, that all the blame does belong with this other person, and that the reason you got into this was, first of all, you didn't know, Second of all, you were being human, and those are the issues. And you can't beat yourself up about something you didn't know, and you shouldn't beat yourself up about being human. So anyhow, we all deserve the opportunity to recover from these situations, and hopefully with the recovery comes wisdom and the ability to know that there are people out there who we definitely need to avoid, and to know how to spot them and to learn how to protect ourselves. Sammy, no burnout, no way. Absolutely, I agree. And Katrina writes that when you don't trust yourself, it invades all aspects of your life. And yeah, that's true. And that's why it's so important to focus on your recovery from this experience. And remember that what sociopaths do is target our vulnerabilities. And so there's two parts to your recovery. There's the part of recovering from what the sociopath did, and then for those who had a sociopath come into their lives, as opposed to those who ended up with sociopathic parents. But the thing that you need to do is, first of all, recover from the sociopath, and then secondly, identify the vulnerabilities that made you vulnerable to the sociopath to begin with. And typically what that is some experiences or beliefs from earlier in your life that didn't honor you. So they need to be identified and released. So when you do these things, when you recover from the actions of the sociopath, and then figure out what went on before and recover from that, that's when you hit pay dirt. That's when you really are able to recover and become much more centered, much more whole, and move forward with your life. Okay, so that looks like the end of the questions for today. I thank you all so much for joining me. I thank you all for your very nice, kind words. I'm so glad that Lovefraud is helping you, my books, these videos, and we'll see you next Tuesday. Thanks a lot. Good night.